Good evening, boys and girls. How are you today? Can you give me a wave? Give me a wave. Okay, good. It's lovely to see you all again, and I'm really happy that you've all come to listen to some more Sparkle stories. I absolutely love doing these story sessions, so we'll keep them going, and hopefully I can read to you some stories that you've never heard before. So we've had a really good week this week, and our Sparkle Arts theme has been pirates and princesses, which has been really good fun. But for stories, we're going to keep that separate from our weekly theme because it's nice to find different stories if I can. But tonight, we are going to introduce some stories that I think some of you might know. And the reason that I have chosen these stories is because they were my little boy's absolute favourite. And I'm sure you'll all love them too. And even if you've heard it before, you never get tired of hearing these stories. So we'll have to wait and see what they are. Now, before I start the story tonight, I want to show you our new Sparky puppet. Now we call him Sparky, and he is from our Sparkle Arts logo. Instead of having an E or an E in Sparkle, we have this very clever little man. And he has a light bulb above his head because he's very smart, very clever, and he loves to learn. Now, the Sparkle Arts team have been calling him Sparky, but I think it would be much more fun if someone out there, one of the children, came up with an exciting name for our Sparkle Arts puppet. So we're going to run a competition to win a book voucher so that you can download a book online or an Audible story. And we're going to run this for the next 7 days. And we would like you to contact us through the website or any of our social channels with your ideas of a name for our puppet. And then I'm going to think of some fun, creative things to do with our puppet once he has a name. So we'll pop, actually let's put Mr. Sparky up here. Will he fit there? Perfect. Next to my lovely unicorn and rainbow. And Sparky was made by the same person who made this lovely rainbow that I spoke about last week, the Little Felt Factory. So you need to check it out. It's all handmade and it's beautiful, and I feel very lucky that we've been given our very own special handmade puppet. So we are very, very lucky. Okay, so I'm going to read you another story from our lovely folk tales from around the world, because there's one more that's to be read in the month of May. And we're still in May, and it's a very nice story. So here we go. Are you listening? Are you sitting comfortably? Good. Let's begin. The story is called The Hare in the Moon, and it's a Buddhist story. Long ago, there was a wise and gentle hare who lived in a wood at the foot of a mountain. Hare was kind and thoughtful. He always cared for everyone, even the tiniest little beetle in the wood. The other animals loved to gather round to listen to all his stories and learn his wise ways, especially his best friends, Monkey, Jackal and Otter. One night, as the four friends sat under a starry sky, Hare looked up and smiled. "We have learnt how to live happily together," he said. "But think how much more wonderful it would be if we could bring happiness to others." "How can we do that?" asked Monkey. Hare thought for a moment. "Well, we should care for whoever comes into our wood by giving them what they need," he suggested. "That's a good plan," said Jackal, and the others all agreed. The next day, a poor man dressed in rags came into the wood. He was so thin that he was little more than skin and bone, and over his shoulder he carried a sack. The man came to the riverbank where Otter lived and asked for food. Otter swam off and returned with a fish which he gave to the man, who put it into his sack. The man came to the riverbank where Otter lived and asked for more food. Again, Otter swam off and returned with another fish, and the man put it in his sack. Further down the track, the man met Jackal and once more asked for food. Jackal tramped off to a village nearby and returned with a pot of milk curd. He gave it to the man, and the man put it in his sack. Then Monkey scampered along, and as before, the man asked for food. So Monkey climbed up a tree, picked a bunch of sweet mangoes, and into the sack they went. Now, Hare saw the hungry-looking man and thought, "Here's a chance to care for somebody's needs. I shall find him food to eat." Hare bounded off in search of something delicious, but all he could collect was grass. Said Hare. "Even a hungry man won't eat grass." He felt sad. "If only I could bring beans or rice." Then, as he thought about the things a man would eat, he suddenly realised that there was something he could offer. Hare returned to the man, who was gathering sticks to make a fire, and watched as he unwrapped his bundle and pulled out a cooking pot. He hung it over the fire on a pole. Before long, the pot was bubbling, and the smell of yummy fish brought the other animals close. Hare stepped forward. "I see you are hungry and need food," he said, "but I have no beans or rice to give you. Instead, I offer you myself, because I know that a man will eat a hare from the pot." And with these words, he shook his fur to make sure there was no insects, gave his ears a little wiggle, and he sprung forward to the cooking pot. At once, the pot and the fire disappeared. To Hare's surprise, he landed, but not in the boiling water, but in the arms of the man. The other animals watched in astonishment. "Gentle Hare," said the man, setting him down on the grass. "I am not a hungry stranger. I am the Lord of the heaven above the mountain. I heard all about your generosity and came to see if what I had heard is true." "It is true," said Hare's friends. "Hare is the kindest creature in the wood." Then the rags fell away, and the Lord of heaven above the mountain began to grow. He grew and grew and grew before their eyes until he was big enough to put his arms around the huge mountain and squeeze. The water from the mountain in the rocks flowed out. Then he dipped his finger into the rock water, reached up to the sky, and drew the figure of the hare onto the face of the moon. Now, the world will remember the hare who wanted to bring happiness to others, said the Lord of the heaven above the mountain. And if you look up to the moon on a dark night, you may see the hare for yourself. That's such a nice story. Have you seen the moon at night? The next time that you see the moon in the sky, see if you can find the picture of the hare on the moon. I'm very excited to do that. Now, the other story I've chosen for you tonight is a Mr. Man book. My son loves these books, and we had to read every single one over and over and over again. So I thought it would be nice to read one of these. And we're going with Mr. Happy. On the other side of the world, where the sun shines hotter than here, and where the trees are 100 feet tall, there is a country called Happy Land. As you might very well expect, everyone who lives in Happy Land is as happy as the day is long. Wherever you go, you see smiling faces all around. It's such a happy place to be that even the flowers seem to smile in Happy Land. Sounds lovely. And as well as all the people being happy, all the animals in Happy Land are happy too. If you've never seen a mouse smile, or a cat, or a dog, or even a worm, go to Happy Land. Have you been to Happy Land? I've not been to Happy Land, but I'd like to go. Now, this is a story about someone who lived there, who happened to be called, Mr. Happy. Mr. Happy was fat and round and happy. He lived in a small cottage beside a lake, at the foot of a mountain and close to a wood in Happyland. There in the trunk of one of the very tall trees was a door. Not a very large door, but nevertheless a door. Certainly a door, a small, narrow, yellow door. It's definitely a door. "Oh, I wonder who lives here," thought Mr. Happy, and he turned the handle of that small, narrow, yellow door. The door wasn't locked, and it swung open quite easily. Just inside the small, narrow, yellow door was a small, narrow, winding staircase leading downwards. Mr. Happy squeezed his rather large body through the rather thin doorway, squeeze, and began to walk down the stairs. The stairs went round and round and down and down and round and round and down and down. Where's he going? Eventually, after a long time, Mr. Happy reached the bottom of the staircase. He looked around and saw there in front of him another small, narrow door. But this time, the door was red. Mr. Happy knocked on the door. "Who's there?" said a voice. A sad, squeaky sort of voice. "Who's there?" Mr. Happy pushed open the red door slowly, and there, sitting on a stool, was somebody who looked exactly like Mr. Happy, except he did not look happy at all. In fact, he looked miserable. "Hello," said Mr. Happy. "I'm Mr. Happy." "Oh, are you indeed?" sniffed the person who looked like Mr. Happy but wasn't. "Well, my name is Mr. Miserable, and I'm the most miserable person in the world." "Why are you so miserable?" asked Mr. Happy. "Because I am," replied Mr. Miserable. "How would you like to be happy like me?" asked Mr. Happy. "Oh, I'd give anything to be happy," said Mr. Miserable. "But I'm so miserable I don't think I could ever be happy," he added miserably. Mr. Happy made up his mind quickly. "Follow me," he said. "Where to?" asked Mr. Miserable. "Don't argue," said Mr. Happy, and he went out through the small, narrow red door. Mr. Miserable hesitated, and then followed. Up and up the winding staircase they went, up and up, round and round, up and up, round and up until they came out into the wood. "Follow me," said Mr. Happy again, and they both set off through the wood back to Mr. Happy's cottage. Mr. Miserable stayed in Mr. Happy's cottage for quite some time. And during that time, the most remarkable thing happened. Because he was living in Happyland, Mr. Miserable, ever so slowly, stopped being miserable and started to be happy. His mouth stopped turning down at the corners. And ever so slowly, it started turning up at the corners. Is he trying to smile? And eventually, Mr. Miserable did something he'd never done in the whole of his life. He smiled. and then he chuckled, which turned into a giggle, which became a laugh. A big, booming, hearty, huge, giant, enormous laugh. And Mr. Happy was so surprised that he started to laugh as well, and both of them laughed and laughed. They laughed until their sides hurt and their eyes watered. Mr. Miserable and Mr. Happy laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. They went outside and still they laughed. And because they were laughing so much, everyone who saw them started laughing as well. Even the birds in the trees started to laugh at the thought of somebody called Mr. Miserable who couldn't stop laughing. And that is really the end of the story, except to say that if you ever feel as miserable as Mr. Miserable used to, you know exactly what to do. Such a nice story. So if you ever feel sad or miserable, just try to remember to smile, and it makes it all better. So, boys and girls, thank you so much for joining me again at Sparkle Stories. I think it's probably time for you to start slowing down, have some quiet time, and get ready for a lovely, lovely night's sleep. So I'm going to say goodnight, and remember, when you're dreaming, I'll see you at the bottom of the rainbow in the sky. Sleep well, good night, and goodbye.